5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Off the Front Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Rob Huberty, the co-founder and COO of ZeroEyes. ZeroEyes is a veteran-owned company that is successfully using AI technology and the already existing security camera infrastructure of any school, business, or other organization to detect brandished firearms in the crucial moments before a shooting takes place. This isn't still just a concept or science fiction even. ZeroEyes has already put this AI technology to work behind the scenes across the country. After a successful career in the SEAL teams and earning an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, Rob, along with several of his teammates from SEAL Team 4, decided in 2018 to put the knowledge and experiences gained in the military and in business school to work to combat the growing problem of gun violence in schools. Having lived close to Sandy Hook Elementary during one period of his life, and then later attending college with several students who had survived the Columbine shooting, to Rob, the issue was too close to ignore. At ZeroEyes, Rob and his teammates are in the business of protecting people, and it was a real honor to sit down with him for a few minutes to talk about how clients of ZeroEyes are using AI to add another layer of protection for their organizations across the country. To learn more about ZeroEyes or to schedule a demo of their product to see how ZeroEyes can help add another layer of security to your school, business, or any other organization, check them out on the web at ZeroEyes.com. One last point, if any listeners are watch fans like I am, I owe you an apology for ending the recording before Rob and I talked about another one of our favorite topics, watches. If you're a watch nerd too, do yourself a favor and check out Rob's interviews with Andrew Morgan on the Watchfinder podcast and also his interview with Tim Masso over at Watchbox. All right, I think I've covered everything, so without further delay, let's get to the show. So, Rob Huberty, welcome to Off the Front Podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to talk a little bit about school security and AI's impact on school security. And we talked a little bit before we started recording, and I told you that I first learned about you on the Watchfinder podcast and also the Watchbox podcast. You have impeccable taste in timepieces, and so, but it's funny, I tuned in for the watch conversation and was really intrigued by the talk about what you're doing now with your career. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you today about. So you are working... you're the COO and co-founder of ZeroEyes. Any listeners that want to hear more about your career in the SEAL teams, I recommend they check out the Mic Drop podcast and Cleared Hot if they want to hear more about that, because you've got some great stories there also. But so you retired from the Navy.
Separated, not retired.
Oh, okay. So you separated from the Navy, went to grad school, earned an MBA, and then with several of your teammates from SEAL Team 4, you started ZeroEyes in 2018. So I wanted you to tell me first, coming from the teams and you're looking at the possibilities out there, what got you interested in and what made you ultimately make that decision to go into this field of school security?
Initially getting out of the military, I guess I'll talk about this first. I saw the path and the trajectory of like the military and the wars kind of dwindling. And I think that, self-assessment, maybe I wasn't really made for the military. I don't necessarily just do what I'm told and whatever it is. And the SEAL teams are great for that. And it's really innovative, but I still think even, I was maybe more 1 or 2 or maybe close to 3 standard deviations above the mean when it comes to following like the rules. Like I just wasn't good at that. And it wasn't like I was just rebelling against whatever, but I needed to hear a why. Mm-hmm. And even in the SEAL teams, like you don't necessarily get that. And I could accept that if we are going to war and it's just the operational tempo of like going on missions all the time was already starting to go down. I had really, good or bad deployments, it's really hard to define what that is. Before a deployment, you think a good deployment is one in which you go to war and get into gunfights and you get shot at, and it's just having gotten shot at, it's actually not cool to get shot at. And and then there's tragedies that kind of follow you, and you think your good deployments are bad and bad deployments are good, and like all of those kind of things. So I knew that I had to do something kind of different on my own. I wanted to go into business. I didn't know what I wanted, so I went to business school, and I was fortunate enough to get into Wharton, and that's a great school. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So going from the military and having a very purpose-driven life and focus, it is really difficult to go to business school where people are motivated by different things. And, maybe more, it sounds selfish, which is, it's not even necessarily that bad, but you see, like, I want to be an investment banker. I want to be a consultant. What do those people do? What do you add to society? And there's something to add. I don't want to be, pessimistic and, it's just everybody's chasing money. But there is some element of that when you're just like, why did you do that? People ask, like, why did you serve your country? Weren't you afraid? But like, yeah, I was afraid. Well, why'd you do it? You don't even, why wouldn't you? And it's just a different perspective. And then once you graduate school, what do? I ended up actually working at Amazon right away. So for 2 years, I did operations for Amazon. And it's a similar thing. It's supposed to be prestigious. It's a career path. It's a lot to learn, but it didn't scratch the itch that I really wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And why school security? You have to back up to earlier in my life and where I've been to get there. So I went to a middle school in Connecticut that was called Chalk Hill, that was subsequently renamed Sandy Hook Elementary School.
Okay.
It wasn't where the shooting occurred, but it was a town, that borders Monroe, touches Newtown, Connecticut. And the schools, I think, are pretty much identical. Like, it was built by like the same contractor around the same time. And it was actually, they were going to tear down Chalk Hill, and it was empty. So they brought all the kids into there. And which is to say that it turns out I went to church with like a lot of the first responders. I talked to people who were involved at this subsequently, and just learned, like, we went to church together. Oh, did you know this guy? You went to, you're like, oh my God. Like, I knew people involved in that. I didn't live there anymore. I was in the military when that happened. And, that's something like, I thought I lived in a boring town that I wanted to get away from. And literally one of the most horrific school shootings that ever occurred happened there. And then if you back up to where I went to college at the University of Arizona, and I went to college in the fall of 1999. Columbine happened in April of 1999. And a handful of kids who went to Columbine high school went to the University of Arizona afterwards. And I'd run into them at parties, and you hear the stories. They're a little bit like celebrities on campus. Oh, that's one of the Columbine kids. And if you were in a 300-person lecture hall for like Psych 101 or whatever as a freshman, there was probably like 3 classes that got interrupted that turned into firsthand Columbine accounts. That stuff leaves an impression on you.
Sure. And
we'd go to parties and the same kind of thing. I've been with my wife almost 20 years now. I got married in a courthouse in Virginia Beach, because in the military, very often you do 2 weddings. You do the one for, to get BAH and whatever it is. And then you do your family wedding. Sometimes it's a year apart, it's like a timing thing.
Right.
So the courthouse that I got married in Virginia Beach, that I lived about a quarter mile from, had also another mass shooting that, it made, national news. And all of those things kind of combine. I want to have a purpose. I want to solve things with technology. And I wasn't really satisfied with my career at Amazon of, shipping boxes. Even though it's good, it's innovative, it's cool. What am I doing that's more like the SEAL teams that has that? And I honestly, I struggled getting out of the military. And there was a camaraderie of friends who were like, what are you guys doing? We all went and got nice MBAs. I'm like, what? Do you like private equity? You're like, no, I don't. Do you like running operations? You're like, it's okay. Why don't we do something together? And we're just like, what's it going to be? I don't really know. And then the Parkland shooting occurred. So the Parkland shooting, we looked at the videos, and the video stuff of it was pretty devastating. And now we're seeing, the Uvalde is maybe the most devastating video that I've seen. But the Parkland was really bad, and we saw the shooter, and there was footage of them on camera, and they warned another kid, and like the stories are so bad. And he said, why isn't someone watching this?
Yeah.
And then there's like, we just came to find out no one watches any video. And he said, shouldn't there be something that does? Surely. And there wasn't. So we made it. And it's, as silly as that sounds, we're like, could we detect guns? There's facial recognition. Of course, you have to. And we started in Mike, our CEO's basement. He's like, hey, I got this idea. Let's, get the gang together a little bit. And we started recording data, and Tim Sulzer, our CTO, who is not in the military, had done computer vision, and he was really, really good at it. And like, we have to record all of our own data. We have to do all this stuff because we looked at Parkland, that one instance. If you would have known that there was a shooter right there, perhaps the story could have been different.
Right.
And then if you look at Columbine, there's pictures of them walking around on the camera with guns, and they went in with pipe bombs, and there was weeks to catch them, and they say they were going to do it, but on cameras, there's perhaps an hour or more. It's tough to say. And on all of these cases, again and again, they show their guns really early. They walk around. It's always from a parking lot. And so we built our company from that, mostly military veterans, not entirely. And we've built ZeroEyes. And fundamentally what we do is we observe your existing video cameras. We say, is there a gun in this image? If there's a gun, we can detect it. We use a human in the loop. So we have military veterans who verify all of the alerts. So as much as we can, we keep that, it more or less has to be a gun or really, really, really look like for a gun for us to dispatch it. And then we dispatch it, and then we're going to follow up and, tell the people that know. And so ideally, if you save that time, you give time back to the first responders. They could be at the right place at the right time with the right equipment.
And that was what I was going to ask too, so there's humans sitting down watching this video, because I know when I first heard about it, of course, my first reaction was, what about, false detections and whatnot? So every detection is verified by a human in you guys call it the ZOC, right?
Right. So it's an operations center.
Sure.
And we employ veterans. They don't actually see the real-time video feeds.
Oh, okay.
So our AI, let's say it's on premise, it's on hardware that's at so we don't actually have access to your video. So it's going frame by frame. It says, this could be a gun. And so we leave the threshold pretty open. So we're going to receive, a number of false positives, and that our operators, military veterans who are sitting monitoring, they're going to see an image in front of them. There's going to be a box drawn around it. Is that a gun? So it looks enough like a gun to where AI is like, this could be a gun. And then our operator is going to say, gun or no gun. And if they dispatch it, we're going to follow up with 911 calls. We're going to make sure that everybody received the alerts, so that we're going to go through that order, and it's going to be a real life human who can talk you through the scenario, who can tell you the place, time, what they saw. And, if there's something left to interpretation, we're going to call you up on the phone and tell you what that is. And we're going to do that to also 911.
Okay. How quickly does that whole process take place, from the moment an operator sees what they determine to be a firearm of some sort and they click the button? How quickly does that turn into a lockdown at that school? Who's notified first in the school that could trigger a lockdown? Or does ZeroEyes have the capability of automatically triggering lockdowns? I'd spoken last May with one of my BUDS instructors who runs an AI company in San Diego, and they actually monitor internal communications, but he had mentioned that, there are some applications that can automatically trigger lockdowns if they sense firearms and stuff. Is that something you guys can do, or?
So there's a two-part question of that. How long does it take? And then can you do lockdown? So I guess the answer to both is it depends, but I'll go through it.
Okay.
So we say as fast as 3 to 5 seconds for like that whole loop, as fast as, because if an image comes up and it is absolutely unequivocally a gun and it's really obvious, then it's really fast.
Okay.
And typically when a gun shows up, we're going to get alert. And if it is not, in fact, a gun, it may just be one from a different place. So it's not as many. So if something is very obviously a gun, it can actually be quick. But if something takes a second, be like, wait a minute, is that what I think it is? You may say, hey, can I get eyes on this and have another person look at it? All of which saying a handful of seconds. I don't want to commit to say that it's this because I don't want to dispatch stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's a fine balance of, if you start thinking about like, I think that's a gun, we're going to dispatch that. Like if you have a bunch of people doubting towards gun, we'll dispatch it, right?
Yeah.
But if it's a gun, it can be really, really quick. And if it's a false positive, it doesn't really matter how fast we respond to it, because as long as we don't dispatch, it doesn't matter. But those things can be most of the determinations by the operator are like in the 1 second range. But when you're looking at something, you have to be sure a handful of seconds. So the AI makes that determination in a fraction of a second. The alert to show up in front of the operator is a fraction of a second. That decision process, couple of seconds. The dispatch and then you receive it should be pretty quickly. But,
okay.
That's always going to be depending on networks and stuff like that. But we try to test and make sure that all of this feedback loop is as fast as 3 to 5 seconds. Like, it's pretty quick, a handful of seconds.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, most schools are locked down anyway, just to begin with. And the doors have to be closed to do a lockdown. Like, generally speaking, school doors are locked except for, when class is empty and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We potentially could lock down schools with those alerts, and that's entirely up to the school, because people have different policies and we are not there to dictate policies. As much as we can, we are going to exist within what it is that you have.
Mm-hmm.
We're in many hundreds of schools, I think, at this point, and on tens of thousands of cameras, and everybody does it a little bit differently, and we're going to do it the way that you want. We're going to meet you wherever you are and give you the information so you use it the way that some have operation center, some will have 911 call center, some it's just one person in the town who's multiple schools. So we're going to do what you want.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I always kind of run this through what my high school looks like and how things work, and for our school to do lockdown drills or do these things, a person actually goes to the intercom, which, to me seems a little inefficient to have to walk yourself to the intercom and get on there and call a lockdown. So that's what I was kind of wondering about, if there was a way to. There's
opportunity. There's so many tools. I've seen it all. And a lot of it is people have strong opinions and they're going to go the way that they're going to go.
Sure.
Some are for good reason and they know their environment better than I do. We'll bring expert opinion and try to help them, but we're going to aid in the way that they want to do it.
Okay. And you mentioned too that, there's no new hardware that's been installed. This uses existing cameras. What you guys are selling is software.
So there is a hardware component of how we process, but that has nothing to do with your camera system. We can either do that with an on-premise, like we put a piece of hardware on your site, so it processes on site. We can do it in the cloud. There's more than one way to do it.
Okay.
But it's not our camera. It's the cameras that you already have. We do have minimum camera requirements. Garbage in is garbage out. And so we're analyzing pictures, generally speaking, a good way to do it. If human eyes can determine something, so can we. But sometimes human eyes, after the fact that something, if you see a super blurry object that for a fact is a gun afterwards, we need, digital IP cameras that are, I'd say at least 720 and above to give you an idea. So,
okay.
The old analog cameras that look like they have Vaseline in front of it, that's not going to work for us.
Can you talk a little bit about a price point, what this would cost an organization? And it's worth mentioning, this is not schools only. This is any organization that...
Not at all. So the initial, I think, use case was schools, just because, the story that I told, that's how we felt.
Sure.
My wife is a teacher and those kind of things. But it turns out that insider threat, the courthouse that I talked about, it was a disgruntled employee coming back. I think they were fired or something like that. And they'd worked there for many years. They knew all the people, they knew how to get in and access points, and they had guns from the parking lot. So anywhere there's digital IP cameras that exist, where you have the entrances and exits and that kind of stuff, our software works. So it's, corporate headquarters, sporting events, hospitals, schools are, one component, but commercial, and then, military bases also as well.
Okay.
So in terms of price points, the answer again is it depends. So, we do a per camera per month fee in which we take all the hardware, all the processing, our installation, our expertise, and then in addition to that, the monitoring itself, all of that's included. It's one fee. I deal with the pricing less, and it just depends on how many cameras you do and the more volume. If you're doing a massive district, we try to make it as affordable as possible.
Right.
Our goal is to do that. There's a pretty large variation between the higher the number of cameras, lower it will be per camera, because we use NVIDIA GPUs and all of that, and there's a component of all that combined.
Okay.
So it just depends. Are we doing districts at a time, and there's economies of scale in it.
Okay. I know in one of the conversations I'd listened to earlier, I think it was talked about, that maybe some states are making grants available. I know that you yourself are not the expert maybe in grants, but do you have experts or someone that writes grants that works for you guys that can help with that?
So we have people who can help with it. We can help people see what works and those kind of things. Yes, absolutely. We're working with legislators. I think we're in roughly 40 states at this point. So we have seen how this works, and so we'll gladly talk you through with what has worked for others in the past. To get funding.
Yeah,
I mean, it's one of these things. Like, we want to be ubiquitous. We want to be on every camera. We want to make people safe, and we want to do it in a least intrusive way. So the cameras already exist. We don't actually get to pull your live feeds. We're only looking for guns. We don't sell any information. We only try to get the only thing that any information is used for is to make our model better. Like, we don't have any, positive identifiable attributes. Like we're not interested in that. We're only interested in safety. So we want to spread the message and help people to do it.
Yeah, well, I'll ask you this question too. And speaking of unintrusive, so last year there was a shooting in Nashville that took place at one of the schools, and so I understand you talking about being from a nearby city to Newtown, or even not the exact same school, but if you're close to these things, it definitely impacts you.
Absolutely.
I'm about an hour away from Nashville, and that's all we thought about this year when school started. But I just want to get your opinion on this. Tennessee has a habit of introducing and reintroducing legislation to arm teachers every time they think about school shootings. What are your thoughts, if you want to share, on arming teachers?
So my wife she's not right now. She stays home with her kids. In our personal household, we don't really feel like arming teachers is perhaps the right thing, certainly for her, because she's not trained with that. I am not going to say that that's true of anybody. If somebody's really trained, there's different circumstances. I don't want to give a hard answer on this because people have really strong feelings in a lot of different ways. The only thing that I will say is, in my military career, I've seen a lot of accidents with guns.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of accidents with guns from the highest levels of the military. I won't single anybody out or any organization.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much every organization that exists, I've seen accidents with guns. So there has to be a high level of training and a high level of respect if anybody wants to do that. I think that there are nurturers and there are protectors, and to a large degree, let the nurturers nurture and let the protectors protect.
Yeah.
That's about as harsh as I'll come to it.
No, I think it's a great answer. And that kind of leads me into this next question I have. I know that you're in the business of keeping students and teachers and staff safe in schools and other organizations. And I know that you do a fair amount of reading also into these school shootings that have taken place. And so I think that it's fair to say that you research these topics. As someone who has your background and the experiences that you've had, what would your advice be to any teachers who are listening on what they can do today to increase their security and safety while they're at school?
So I'm just one layer of safety.
Mm-hmm.
And what I view our company as just one layer. We are not the only solution. It's part of a multi-layer of solution. And so we are a net that catches somebody at that last faithful moment when there is one last thing to do. That is who we are. So what I hope that we could do is let teachers be comfortable enough that that net is there and it exists for them, and they can. It turns out that just about every one of these people telegraphs what they're going to do. And if teachers make eye contact with the troubled student and say, "Are you okay?" it turns out that that's probably going to do a lot of good. Because you're in your classroom and you know your students and you know when they act differently and they behave differently. Every day we have to see things in the news that are bad. Today, for example, they did the trial of the parents of the shooter in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they were found guilty, right? And I saw an interview with another one of the parents of the victim. So they lost, one of their children. And I think the parents were conflicted, and they're like, should these people pay? And I think that they wanted to be like, yeah, make them pay. And the parent was like, had you listened to your kid who had told you this before, you would have seen the signs. It was your job to see the signs. And I think if the teachers aren't as task saturated, because I know that they are, there's so many things that they need to do, and you can look at somebody eye to eye and be like, are you okay? And if they're not, then kind of go down that path. I think that a lot can be avoided. I've seen a lot of homework assignments, like actual homework assignments that were turned in. I think there's a very high correlation with very disturbing assignments turned in that kind of telegraph it in a very, very obvious and graphic way historically. It's, when someone, I guess, snaps, you never saw it coming. Well, then you never saw it coming. But I think, teachers, if you are trying to make good citizens and you're empathetic and you see that, I think that you can see these things.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's great advice too. I think so many times that, the first reaction is some sort of, offensive or defensive measure, like arm teachers or, have an escape plan or all these things. But I like your answer because you're focusing on the more human aspect of this whole issue is the individual, looking at the person, talking, taking some time to spend with that individual. As a teacher myself, I think a lot of these kids, and they need someone to care. And I think what you're saying is right in line with that. So tell me a little bit about, to kind of wrap this up, I was really interested in what you guys were doing at ZeroEyes, and I wanted, to have you on to kind of talk about your product, talk about what you guys are doing. I really like it. At school today, every time I passed a camera, I was like, man, it would be so quick and easy to get ZeroEyes in here and have somebody watching these cameras, and watching what's going on. And obviously with the help of AI, picking out those firearms and things that look like that, I like what you're doing. Talk a little bit about what, anyone who's listening and might want to learn more about ZeroEyes, how they can find you, if, like I said, parents or concerned members of the community or school board officials, what do these people need to do to get ZeroEyes into their organizations or into their schools?
I mean, we're on kind of every form of social media. I think our website's probably the best thing, just ZeroEyes.com. I mean, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, I'm rob@ZeroEyes.com. Reach out to me directly, and we can kind of talk about whatever is needed. Every circumstance is a little bit different, and we can kind of have experts talk you through it.
Okay. Simple enough. And you guys do demos, right?
Absolutely. We do online demos. We show you, in our office what detections look like, and then there's all sorts of things.
Okay.
I think there's certainly a lot of content on our website as well.
That sounds great. I'll post in the show notes links and everything I can do to steer people your way.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you joining me today. And again, I appreciate your time on this afternoon. I know you're ready to wind down for the day, and appreciate it, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Rob Huberty for joining me on today's show. Between the rapid growth that ZeroEyes is currently experiencing and being a full-time family man, Rob stays plenty busy. So it's a real honor that he was willing to take a few minutes to join us on the show. If you're interested in finding out more about ZeroEyes or talking to them to find out how they can help secure your school, business, or organization, visit ZeroEyes.com. Be on the lookout for more episodes of Off the Front to come out soon. Like I mentioned before, I'm really interested in using this platform to meet new people, learn about new things, and to bring it all to you to enjoy the journey with me. So until next time, stay healthy, strong, and curious about life. And we'll talk again soon.